Hi, and welcome to the Built Environment Marketing Show, hosted by me, Ayo Abbas. Before the show begins, I just wanted to do a bit of an intro to this very special episode, which is a recording of a webinar that I took part in earlier this week, looking at brand, it's personal. The session was for Build Up, which is a network of marketing and communications professionals from the built environment. And what we wanted to do was have a session where we talked about personal brand and company brand and how I guess you can make it work for our businesses, but also for ourselves as marketeers. I'll put some notes in the show notes about Build Up so you can find out more about us as a community and if you're interested in joining. Now let's get on and listen to the webinar. Hope you enjoy it.
Welcome everybody. Welcome to the second Build Up event of the year and the first online event that we've run in a little while. My name's Dominique Staindl. I'd like to welcome you all to this fireside chat about personal branding in a professional setting. For those of you who are new, Build Up is a networking community for the built environment set up and run voluntarily by our fabulous and friendly steering committee, most of whom you'll find on this call, and you can identify on our website and on LinkedIn posts as well. Now, a testament to the interest in today's topic is that we've had hundreds of online subscribers. Well, maybe just 100 so far, but we'll get those numbers up. And yet the concept of brand itself or personal brand is often misunderstood, or it's placed in a box, or it's simply left alone for fear that it's not relevant to me, being you, the audience. So here to change your mind, to debunk any myths and share their wisdom this afternoon are two of the best people for the job and fellow Build Up Steering Committee members. Ayo Abbas of Abbas Marketing. So Ayo runs her own marketing business, managing content and campaigns for engineers and architects across the UK. And Chris Moore. Chris is the head of communications at Price & Myers and is a hardcore brand enthusiast. I'll be asking them questions, but most of all, we want your comments in the relevant comment boxes on whichever platform you're tuning in from today, be it LinkedIn or StreamYard. So that's enough from me. Let's get the conversation started. Ayo, I'm going to start with you. What is personal brand?
So I think, there's tons of definitions out there, but for me, the main one that really stands out is it's what people say about you when you're not in the room. I think that's a really lovely definition because you can put what you like about yourselves out into the world, but actually it's what people actually take in, what they understand and how they communicate it to others. So for me, personal brand is really around that. And it's really important because ultimately people do business with people and, that human connection, that human touch, that human relationship. So I think that whole thing around personal brand is about, what you convey to the world, but also what the world kind of takes in about you.
And Chris, what about you? How do you see it as different to your reputation?
Well, I should start off by saying that not everyone agrees with me on this, but including some very influential sort of business teachers and authors. So feel free to disagree with me. But I've always advocated for treating B2B communications in the same way as B2C communications, because, people are people. And as Ayo said, we like doing business with people. And I think that similarly about brand for business and personal brand, that there are a number of sort of significant overlaps. I think the first thing to really acknowledge is that you have a personal brand, whether you like it or not. I think we all do. I've heard people say to me, I don't have a personal brand. And I'm like, if you actively don't have a personal brand, that is your personal brand. That is actually it. Your reputation is related to personal brand. I think there is overlap, but I think they are slightly different. To me, reputation is a more passive quality. They're the first impressions that you make, the way others see you. And I think that, there's a guy, Michael Eisner, who is a former CEO of Disney Corp, and he said that brand is made up of 1,000 gestures. And I kind of see that as like brand is everything. It's the little bits of everything. And that includes your reputation. But I see brand, and as a result, personal brand, as a much more active process. If your reputation is how people see you, your personal brand is how you want people to see you. It's your value and what you stand for, and it's what you're about. And you need a good reputation to be credible, but I think a good personal brand helps make you visible.
I think visibility is the key there, definitely.
Yeah, do we need a personal brand?
I think you've got to have a personal brand. Why? Because if you don't manage it, then you're just leaving it completely open for people to make up their own connotations or own versions of who you are and what you do and what you're about. So I think in some ways it's up to you to kind of convey who you are and put it out there. And I think, like Chris says, we all do have a personal brand. So I think it's very much about kind of what is it that you want to be known for. And I think more personally, I'm always like more marketers should be out there with their own personal brands and not just be hiding in the shadows behind the people we kind of feed and support. So I think that's a huge thing that we don't do. We don't talk as people, as individuals, because we're highly qualified, we're highly skilled, we're experts in what we do, but often we're hidden away and we don't have our own personal brands, but we leave it to our companies. And I think that's a huge kind of missing part in what we do.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to that kind of active process. As you say, I absolutely believe that everyone has a personal brand, whether they like it or not. And your personal brand is about what you stand for and demonstrates your value and can help you just achieve what it is that you want to achieve, whether it's for your work or for your business. And like a business's brand, helps those opportunities come towards you rather than having to always be sort of rolling up the sleeves and out there digging for gold.
And are there different considerations for people working in-house and those who are sort of consulting or business owners, for example?
There are, but again, they are related. I think if you're in-house, then you can be, and I'm sure you guys can all think of examples of this where you've got the right education, you've got the right experience, you're really hardworking, you're really well liked, but people might not know you really well within your practice or your business. And I don't just mean that they don't recognize your face as you come through the door, or they can't put a name to your face. We're all sort of active enough in our businesses for that. But the people don't necessarily know what you stand for. And again, coming back to that thing, personal brand for me is about making yourself visible. It's about what you value and what you work to project. And those two things have to align to be truly authentic, I think, and to truly resonate. And it means that your voice is just more easily heard, that your ideas are better received, that you're more clearly differentiated within your business, and that you can, therefore more clearly differentiate your business, because that's what we do, right? Most of us on this call, as a result of that. And I think if you're a consultant, you're running your own business, then all of that is also true. But you're sort of directing that at people who are already paying you and people that you hopefully want to be paying you sometime in the future. What's your take on it, Ayo?
I guess I'm a consultant and I set up the month before lockdown. So in terms of my personal brand, I wasn't probably going out as much because I'm a single mum, so quite often I'm home. So I had been planning to go out, start to network and build up my personal brand that way, but that was kind of taken away with lockdown. So for me, building a personal brand, getting myself out there, which was very much online. So finding that kind of tone of voice and creating my personal brand, understanding what it was that I stood for, what my business would stand for, that all kind of came to the fore for me when I started working for myself. So it rose in its importance, but also it's taken a while to build. So, I've been at this now for 3 years, and actually now I'm getting referrals because people know what I stand for or do, or they go, oh, actually, I know someone who does that, and I think that type of thing, it takes time to build. So I think whether or not you're working in-house or for yourself, or you might have ambitions to work for yourself at some point, your personal brand is yours, right? And I think if you start building it now, even just starting to do things once a month about things that, to show who you are, that's going to build and stay with you for your whole career. So I think that's the important part of personal brand and why more marketers across the piece, in-house or working for themselves, should do it. And I think it's around, it builds reputation of who you are and gets, it's yours to own.
And I think you two are actually a really good example of that sort of, that your personal brand is really what people buy when they buy your services, that it's clear what you two are about. And, I occasionally commission consultants to come and work with me as well. And when you've got that really clear position that you two do, and I know many other people on the call and in build up, that's really powerful, but it also really helps with trust, that you are differentiated and people understand what you're about, and that just makes it easier to trust you and to know that they're going to get the result that they want.
But also, I think it's also like, it also, as I can say, it also can repel people, not us in particular, but that whole thing whereby it's like, actually, if you're not into these types of issues, then maybe I'm not the consultant for you. Do you know what I mean? It repels people in that way. If you want someone who's quiet and reserved, maybe coming to me is not the thing, so, and that's it. And I think your personal brand kind of conveys that and says that, and it's, who you are, what you like to work with, that experience. And I think that's what it does. And also, I think it also creates value as well, because you turn around and go, then people start to associate, certain things with you, what you can do, who the types of firms you're working with. And again, that's a value, it's valuable in terms of how much you can charge, right? Same thing for, companies as well.
That's spot on. I think that, Dom and I actually had this conversation. We were just chatting about someone's personal brand, or, I don't know, a week or two in preparation for this call. And Dom, you were a little bit like, oh, this feels a little bit dry or a little bit quiet. And it's kind of like, yeah, but what's that person's market? I don't know what their market is. I don't know what they're going after. And they were on LinkedIn. And it's, it's they may not be trying to target me. I may not be in their market. They still might be a lovely person, and I would enjoy having a chat with them. But they are not presenting the sort of thing that I would be looking for, but their market might be.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think it's that whole thing of, you can have repelling content. If you're not into these issues, maybe I'm not the person, and that's fine.
Well, let's not repel anyone. Let's just say not necessarily engage people. Really.
No, I like the word repel. It's a great word. No, Dom.
What I understand you to be saying, Ayo, is that it's a clarifying piece. So it helps identify whether or not, there's a personality, a chemistry check there. But what about, us comms folk, where we understand the value of brand, and it's easy for us to put ourselves out there because we write and because we speak as part of our jobs. What about, I want to pick up on Isabel's question here, because she's voiced essentially what I was going to ask next. And what about the experts who don't have to do that, but don't think that they're, what they've got to say is valuable, or aren't confident about how they can say what they need to say in order to create a brand? Or is it about saying things out loud? Can you help differentiate that?
I think for me, everyone's not going to always want to have something to say. And I think you're right. As comms people, we're in that privileged position that we help people say stuff. But I think there's, sometimes I think if you've got someone who isn't that confident, I'm going to talk about LinkedIn because that's probably where I use the most. But I would say that whole thing, they could just connect and engage, and that could be their strategy on LinkedIn. So like connecting with relevant people and just commenting, supporting the types of people that they want to, connect with and work with. And that could be your personal brand. Is that actually, I'm just a very supportive person who shares my thoughts and opinions, but on someone else's post. So you don't even need to post yourself directly, but you'd still start to build up a network, and people would still start to see you, and you still have visibility, even if you're not posting directly. So I think those kind of softer ways are easier. So you don't always have to be like, I guess, marketers, we're quite happy to be more open. Whereas I think, some engineers and some architects we work with aren't necessarily like that. And I think there are different ways of tackling personal brand that aren't so visible. And, if you're not a speaker, then, you could be writing thought leadership pieces for a magazine or sharing your expertise there. So there's lots of different ways you can kind of share your voice and your opinion. It doesn't have to be so in your face. Yes.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, that you can lead a horse to water, as it were. I think it's about the intent that if somebody wants to sort of, have a bigger presence or a bigger voice, then that's part of what we do to assist people in that way. And, from an in-house point of view, I always say to people, look for internal opportunities first, because then you're talking to an audience that knows you and hopefully knows what you're about to a certain degree. And so I always, talk about, are there regular speaking opportunities in your business? Is there a morning coffee or a lunch meet? Do you do knowledge sharing sessions? And just to contribute to them when and where you can. If there's a 2-minute update on what your group has been doing in your practice, is there a question you could ask the speaker of the day? Get used to putting your hand up and just saying something, and over time, in terms of being a speaker, you will get better. You may not believe this, but I am shy to the point of utter introversion. Like literally, when I was a kid growing up, my local shopkeeper used to call me the judge because I never said a word and I didn't smile. And I forced myself to become a competent speaker. As your old mate from Manchester, Morrissey, said that, shyness is nice and shyness can stop you from doing all the things in life you want to. That is true. And personal brand, is about visibility. So if this is something that you want to develop, you've got to get out of your comfort zone a little bit. You've got to do things, but you can be gentle and you can start slow. And I always say, look for internal opportunities first before you jump out with an opinion piece on LinkedIn or go and give a presentation to the NLA or something like that.
But I guess I love that idea, and it's that scaling part, isn't it? You just scale up in terms of what you're doing in incremental steps, and I think that definitely is the way to do it. And before you start kind of broadcasting stuff, because it can be a bit like whoa.
So then, what's the value? Why should anyone be doing this?
Oh, that's a golden question, isn't it? well, as I said earlier, I think it's about, as with any brand, it's about making your career, in my case, if I'm talking about in-house again, and your business's life easier. It's about, rather than having to constantly be going out, the better you develop your brand, the more those opportunities come to you. And they can be promotional opportunities within your business. They can be if you're in a position within your business that you need to, go out and win work, if you develop your personal brand, then you can really help your business, and that's a virtuous circle that can help you and your business grow. You probably want to comment on LinkedIn here as well, and some stats that we were talking about earlier on.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of LinkedIn, which is the kind of thing that I love, they've got their kind of employee advocacy research piece, and it says employee networks have 10 times more connections than their company page, but only 3% of an employees actually share content about their company. So if I post something as Ayo rather than as Abbas Marketing, it's going to get much more traction. And I think that's where company pages and stuff on LinkedIn aren't necessarily doing the right stuff, because in some ways, posting on your company page may actually be secondary. In some ways, what you might want to do is actually have different variations and encourage your people to actually be posting themselves directly, but you give them the tools to do it and to tailor it in their own way, and they tag your company. Because actually, you get far more reach and reach far more people, and also having their opinions helps your company page anyway. So it's kind of like looking at it in that kind of way of actually how do you make it more valuable, and how do you make it provide more value to the individual, but also to the business. And I think there's also this thing about how do you get your teams and your people to actually want to kind of do this kind of interaction, because the whole kind of employee advocacy piece is huge. But I think in terms of value that having a personal brand brings to me personally, I get opportunities that come through the door. I've had a journalist literally from the Times take a blog I wrote on LinkedIn and put it in a piece. And I didn't have to do anything. He lifted it. He just emailed me and said, I've seen this on your LinkedIn. Can I use it? And that kind of stuff he's not going to find that on my website. But because of LinkedIn, it was on the first page of Google when he did his search. So I think in terms of value that, LinkedIn personal brand can bring to you is a huge amount. And I think it's that whole opportunities. And also people, you start getting, once people understand what you do, people start coming to you. And that's the lovely part. When you're not chasing down work, it actually comes through the door. And if you're a company, it just helps your pipeline no end. When people can actually understand who you are and what you do.
And likewise, if you're in-house, it's exactly that too, and mea culpa, I would really take on board what you've just said there, without turning this into a LinkedIn tutorial. But, our company page for Price and Myers does very moderate engagement, but we've got a couple of really experienced and quite well-known engineers. And we had a partner, Tim Lucas, who's an engineer here who you may know, and really clever guy. And he's like his first Instagram post, he'd only used, LinkedIn. He'd only used LinkedIn just to sort of keep up with what's going on. And then he put a post up about a structure that he had repurposed and put in his kid's primary school as a play climbing frame. And my God, if it didn't get thousands and thousands of likes. And I'm kind of like, that was a little bit of a bing moment for me. It's kind of like, oh crap, we've got to get better at this, don't we? We've got to get these people, these personal brands.
If you harness that, and that could
the
literally, and it's like literally harnessing that. So how often are your engineers going out to site, Chris? If you could harness it so they could actually understand, actually, I saw this on site, isn't this really interesting? I've set the parameters and you don't have to do all of that kind of stuff behind it. But actually, if you can start to enable people to have the confidence to post and share, what the amount of engagement you will get and they will get and connections. Yeah. And also it helps when clients, you meet a client and the client's like, oh, I saw that post about such and such, or, and that does help the conversation.
Hi, it's Ayo here, and I just wanted to tell you a bit more about the show. The Built Environment Marketing Show was set up during Lockdown 1 as a way to help firms do better marketing. It was very much about having the conversations that I have with my friends and showing what best practice really is. In terms of me, well, I'm actually a generalist marketeer, so I guess I know lots of things about marketing and how to put everything together. So I could be talking about, PR, or understanding what to do next strategy-wise, or figuring out how to get in front of the right audience or what messaging you should be using. Those are all things that I'm kind of really skilled in and understand how to do for my clients. I now work for myself, and I set up my own consultancy at Abbas Marketing in 2020. And I'm working with a range of engineering and architectural firms and even PropTech firms who really want to, talk the language of their clients and their audiences and do something a bit different in terms of their strategy and content. If what I do sounds of interest to you, do email me at ayo@abbasmarketing.com, and that's AYO, or head to my website, which is www.abbasmarketing.com for more info. There's also a link in the show notes. Bye.
So talk to me about employers then, and their fear of employees having growing brands.
Well, this is just the battle of our lives, isn't it? If you're a brand person, I think, my take, firstly, and again, if I've done a brand presentation for Build Up a couple of years ago, and I talk about brand endlessly, and and it's equally true of personal brands, I think. But brand is oxygen for a business. Brand is the thing that can just keep you breathing, and it can be hugely influential for you too from a personal point of view. And if somebody in your practice doesn't like brand, or you're a bit nervous about it yourself or skeptical, then you're restricting your breathing. And there's a comment that we when we were talking about this call the other day, there are some employers that don't like their employees to be too prominent and from a personal brand point of view, because it makes them attractive for being poached by other businesses. And I'm kind of like, that's the most warped approach of all time for me. It's like your star striker for your football team scores too many goals, so we're going to play him in defence so that nobody thinks he's that good. Or
don't worry.
We'll put her in the reserve so that nobody thinks she's any good, and we can just keep her a secret. It's just that's a whole different thing about looking after your people. But let your stars go out there and shine for you. And if people are nervous about the word brand, if your senior people are, I always just try to move them away from the word and just get them talking about how you're perceived and how you engage and how people engage with you, because that, to me, that's the sort of essence of brand, really, and it makes it easier for people to kind of conceive of and not think that somebody's trying to con them out of something, which seems to be the way some people approach brand itself.
I guess as well, the personal brand word as well, it's that whole it's got that kind of connection with the word influencer, isn't it? Which nobody wants to be, because you're like, oh, you're on Love Island. But that's the that's the connotation. But influencer is actually the right word, even if it's like a micro influencer. You're an influencer, Chris? Yes, you are. But it's uncomfortable. It's like, even I'm not completely up. When someone says it to me, I'm like, I don't want to be that. But we are all influencers in some way, shape or form. And I think the other thing is, like, when we're talking in-house, I think, that whole thing about people being poached is the thing that, they're always worried about. But that's going to happen anyway. And the key to me is you've got to have a decent kind of CRM system, a decent company page, so you are actually capturing these conversations and meetings and all of that stuff, and have that data and those systems to support personal brand and those relationships. So it's kind of like you are capturing that data. So it's not just about that one person, and you are bringing them into your kind of wider marketing ecosystem. And I think that's really what firms that aren't necessarily doing anyway. And that applies to all marketing activity, not just personal brand. So I think that's the bigger issue, but that's harder to crack than saying just don't post or raise your personal brand because you'll go. It's like, no, you build the system around so that your whole marketing engine works properly. So
I think this subject could be a whole other call, to be fair.
I get angry.
So I'm going to go to another question because I think it's a doozy. Laura Thomas is asking, she's navigating change with personal brand. Well, I don't know whether she is, but navigating change with personal brand, any tips? How does one navigate their change in their personal brand?
Oh, that's good. I think incrementally is probably the best response. And you've either, what are your options, incrementally or big bang? I think if you're trying to sort of change your position for whatever reason, and I don't know, again, we probably delve more deeply into this in terms of what the characteristics are for personal brand change. But to me, it comes back, what do you value? What do you stand for? What are you trying to convey? It's an active process to actually have people take on board what you want them to know and feel about you. So I would just say, if you feel like your personal brand is not in a good position at the moment, a little bit of self-analysis, find out within yourself what it is that you really want to get across. And then incrementally, if you're in-house, as I say, start off with some of these internal opportunities. Tend the garden of your LinkedIn account. Turn up to things and ask questions, all of those sort of simple things. If you want to get known for something else, you just have to incrementally build that up over time. A little bit like what you were saying when you started your business, Ayo.
Exactly, and I think that's exactly it. I mean, I often talk about content pillars and kind of what's the kind of 3 key areas that you want to discuss, or whether you want to take your brand. And like mine are me. I like talking about myself, but that's about my skills, what I do, my education, all that kind of stuff. But then it's like marketing. So marketing in the vein of I'm interested in innovation. I'm interested in how to do kind of marketing better and improving it. And then also around kind of the built environment. So that whole kind of, I know the industry we're in. So that's generally what my 3 pillars are. And I think those pillars are quite broad, but they can evolve and change and kind of slightly shape depending on what's interesting me at that time, or what things I have to sell, or what things I want to do. So I think having that kind of framework or something that is who you stand for, and that can evolve, but I think having something like that can help you kind of navigate change and give you a structure to kind of start working towards. So I find that quite useful in terms of kind of having that kind of content pillar approach, and it just keeps me slightly on track. Now and then you get a completely random post, but that's just something annoying me. But generally, it's over that.
Random is good. Keep people on their toes. That's fine.
Exactly.
Well, speaking of random and sort of veering a little bit off Laura's comment, I've noticed that we've got someone from Abu Dhabi here and someone from Texas. Let's just talk about audiences, because, I mean, this is really important as well. Either, you could be someone young who doesn't think they've got anything to say or doesn't know how to reach the ears or the eyes that they need to. But we've also got sort of a global world now. So how do we navigate our own personal brand when we're trying to sort of reach audiences that we might not know about, or we don't know sort of how to connect with otherwise?
Oh, that's a hard question, Dom.
Sorry.
Question without notice. That's really tricky.
That's really hard.
Europe was going off script. Never go off script.
Yeah, I know. We're all like going, I mean, for me, I think that whole kind of personal brand, global brand, or I think it's the same structure. I don't think it makes any difference. It's because ultimately, I think most marketing, as I'm doing more and more stuff, it's like it boils down to messaging, targeting, and positioning, right? Regardless if you're looking at globally, if you're looking at locally. And I kind of think it's still those key facets. And that if it's a global audience, then you might just use slightly different language, or, there's the perspective of the examples that you share will be more global in nature and stuff like that. And you bring that more into the context of how you explain things. But really, I think it's kind of like, it's the messaging, targeting, and positioning. I still think that's the same framework. and then you just apply it in the right, I guess, level.
Yeah, and it's about aligning, again, I'm talking more from an in-house point of view, but aligning what you're trying to achieve with what your business is trying to achieve. And then, finding out what those targets are, learn more about those areas that you're trying to sort of get more traction on. But I think that, if say, for example, our practice was trying to win work in the United States of America, then I'd be looking to say, just do that research and just know your market and present yourself in the way that feels authentic and see if it resonates. And I think that's, it's easier to say this when you're a bit older, but if, even if you're younger and you're starting out sort of thinking about your personal brand, that alignment isn't conformity. It's not just about doing the thing that you think your business will reward you for doing. It's actually sort of saying, now sometimes, this is particular. I think I'm known as a bit of a contrarian when it comes to brand, and I kind of like sort of upsetting people a little bit. And, the hundreds of times I've started a sentence with, I know you're not going to like this, but hear me out. Sometimes it's actually, okay, I can know a lot about what that person wants or what that market wants, but that doesn't align with my values. That's not what I'm about, or it's not what this business is about. And again, you've got a little bit of education there, and then the preparedness to take a stand or not.
Yeah, and also I think there's also this element of passion as well, of actually finding those issues and those areas that you feel passionate about and care about and are happy to talk about. Because after a while, you'd be like, okay, I've got 3 content buckets. I don't like those buckets. It's gonna be like, ugh. But so I think you've got to find those sweet spots, and that's things that, where you can kind of really add something to that conversation. And that might take some work to find, and they're going to evolve and change over time as well. So for me, I think it's finding those areas as well. And then that's what you want to convey to people.
So that's about authenticity. Let's talk about that in extension to the human versus technology. So we've spoken about LinkedIn being a powerful tool. What about our human brand versus AI that's coming in thick and fast, for example? Chris, do you have anything to say about that?
It's such a good point, Dom. If we've sort of heard nothing much from the last few months, it's about the impact of artificial intelligence. And I think, again, personal brand is one of those things that, AI is apparently coming for our jobs. Those of us who are sort of in the creative industries and writers and presenters and things like that might have thought that we might have been immune, but it isn't true. And I think that there are parts of our jobs that we should absolutely allow artificial intelligence to come for. There's some bits that we can hand over for efficiency. But personal brand, if you're in-house, personal brand is one of those things that's going to help you stay employed, differentiate you from the machine. And, as Ayo said, your passions, the style and the personality and the interest that you bring, make that part of your personal brand, and that will keep your job safe.
Quite interesting there. So it seems like ChatGPT's been kind of in the news for the past couple of months. It's quite interesting seeing some of the kind of conversations happening around that. And a lot of people and copywriters and things are quite scared by it. And to me, I'm like, actually, it's understanding where these tools can help you to do your job. And then understanding where you provide that real kind of extra special sauce, where that, like your USP. And like you say, that's the creativity. That's your own personality. That's your own perspective and views. And I think once you've kind of got that together, those are the areas which are valuable and that can't be automated because that's you. And I think that's kind of what we've all got to start to build. And there's also this kind of interesting thing around things like video and stuff like that actually may become more important going forward, because you can see me, you can hear me, and there are like deep fakes as well, but
if somebody deep fakes me, I will have known I've really made it. If I become that special,
you're not going to like this, but
I'd be delighted. I'd be so flattered if somebody deep fakes me. That'd be amazing.
But I think we got a long way out for that, so that's fine. But what I mean? But there is that thing about video and audio actually going to be coming into their own, because that's hearing us, seeing us. And it's like not necessarily a ChatGPT machine, that you could use that to kind of get your content together. But yeah, it's we've got such an interesting time coming up. But I do think there are, I think the tools are there to help us do our jobs. and we shouldn't be scared of them. But, we do need to recognise that, some of this stuff they can do way quicker than us, and they're getting a lot better.
But it comes back to your original premise, that people like doing business with people as well. And
the
more people we can put into how we communicate, then the better off we all are.
Okay, so sticking to social media just for a moment, I think Mark has brought up a topical point of conversation, but this is really relevant for any organizations that are working overseas or in countries where there's conflicts of interest, for example. And I just wanted to he's used Gary Lineker as the example, but what are your thoughts on an individual's desire to express or build their personal brand when that personality conflicts with the brand of their employer? And I know we touched a little bit on employer thoughts and feelings, but how do we address the conflict, if there is one, or the gap, rather?
I think Gary Lineker is a great example, actually, because his personal brand is so goddamn strong. 8 million followers on social media, sort of a famous sporting person in this country, spectacularly well-known for his views on immigration and refugees and asylum seekers outside of his work on the BBC. And then, when it came into conflict with his employer, his brand was so strong that he was able to use that to his benefit. Now, I mean, it's a unique and I'd say quite an extreme example. It's much easier to not care about losing your job if you don't care about losing your job, right? So I think Gary's a fairly unique, or at least a rare example. I think if Mark Chapman from Match of the Day 2 had been tweeting about asylum seekers, they would have quietly just marched him off the set and no one would have cared too much. But again, it kind of comes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier on about alignment, what your values are, how you are creating your personal brand, and then aligning them with the business that you're in. And you've got, if they are unaligned, well, you've got two options really, don't you? You either work as an influence within that business, or you go and find one that aligns to how you want to work and live. And, I think that he's a great example, but and we should probably all start modelling ourselves up a little bit, but he is a bit unique.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. He does have a really strong following. I think it's a really interesting one. But I do think there is this whole thing as well with also having the right policies in place and the right kind of structures in place, because it doesn't sound like on the BBC example that they were following what they should have been doing and stuff like that, even how they tried to discipline him and stuff. And I think there's that whole thing about, actually making sure that your policies stand up for, what people can and can't do, especially, in social media. You do have to have those policies in place. We've seen those crises happen in our own sector, with people tweeting racist comments or, and I think, that is a risk, having people out there and, doing stuff. So I think you do have to have those safeguards in place, because ultimately it's a reputation of your company and your business as well. So that stuff does need to underpin it. But I think Gary Lineker, for himself, I think it's, the fact he's been reinstated and the guy who was trying to say this is still going to stand is still kind of just about hanging on to his job. I think that says it all, really. But I think that's the unique case of the BBC, because they've got way more things to fight and do. And
I think if you actually dialed this back a little bit and we sort of took something that wasn't quite so that wasn't going to end up on the front page of all the papers in this country, is that if you're working in a business and you are trying to affect change and you are trying to influence that business in a certain way, then even if your sort of personal brand and your personal values are in some way in conflict with that business at the time, if you've got a strong personal brand within your business, you are still going to be in a position where you could have more influence than someone who doesn't. And so again, over time, you keep presenting yourself, you keep being true to your values and what makes you passionate, and you might actually find yourself as your voice increases and your visibility increases within the business. I'd say that's definitely the best way that you're going to be able to affect change anyway. And if you don't, then you sort of might take a view on where you work next. But it's still an absolute positive, even at a much smaller scale than someone like Gary Lineker.
Great question, though.
Good
Thank
question.
Great question. We've got a couple of minutes left. I'm going to take inspiration and amalgamate a few questions. How has developing your personal brand at work affected your offline, not your personal lives, but sort of the outside of work life? I'm looking for inspiration as to how you guys, I mean, you've touched on it individually, but how it's kind of changed your lives developing your personal brand each.
Yeah, my personal brand now means that the mums at the school gates know what I do. It's like, it does. And it's, and stuff like that. So there are things where people are kind of more, just generally understand more about the industry. I'm getting, starting to talk to students and things like that and being able to kind of inspire the next gen, which is quite good. And those opportunities are coming from, can be personal connections who are like, oh, you work in this type of field and stuff like that. So I think there's, outside of work, there are kind of things like that where it's starting to come through, which is quite nice.
I don't know if this answers your question, Dom, but I would say that the sort of impact, again, it's about authenticity, is that, where I start sentences like, you're going to hate this, but hear me out. I mean, I do say that to my wife sometimes when I'm talking about, we'll go on a holiday, or we'll go to, an art exhibition or a restaurant or something like that. And it's just kind of the way that I have put myself together in terms of my brand, and being a little bit contrarian and a little bit like I want to see what happens, has actually really had an impact on my personal life in a lovely way, and occasionally terrifying, but mostly really rewarding way. I don't know if that answers your question.
My 8-year-old does talk about personal brand.
He's the future.
It's a bit scary when he's like, he starts talking about branding, and I'm like, oh my God, and can impersonate me, which is even scarier.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
A profession in the theatre beckons.
I guess what I'm getting at is that the two aren't separate. It's really a brand is a representation of you, inside and outside of any professional setting. And Rachel, I'll just maybe close on this. Rachel sort of was talking about that being really solidified for you, Ayo, during lockdown, but then sort of the continuation and that legacy afterwards. So that's sort of what I was trying to kind of allude to, of the value of it after, because that carried you through a really tough time. And
actually, I now understand the question, right? But there are people that come up to me when I'm out and about networking, and they'll come up and go, I know who you are. Or they'll come and say hello and introduce themselves, either via, I think it's from either my podcast or something else, but something to do with my brand is how they know. So I think that whole personal brand, it helps people to know, like, and trust you way more and way quicker. And I think it builds. So over the years, it gets stronger and stronger. So yeah, that's how that helps me. There you go. I've got it now.
It's my terrible question asking skills. Okay, we're going to wrap up now. Do you have any last points to make, either of you, that you haven't been able to cover, or you?
Actually, I've got two. And further to that question, because outside of work life, it's been a long time since I've been on a date, thankfully. But I just think, if you're out there in the dating world, and again, I don't know anything about the apps and all of this, I'm way too old to be married for any of that crap, right? So you do. Your personal brand is actually something to really be thoughtful of if you're going on to one of these dating apps, I think, because some of this, I see some social media around, some accounts. One's called Tinder Banter and another one's called Ask Aubrey, and it's basically Reddit feeds and Tinder bios and things like that. And they're just dreadful, and they make you, just make you want to be vomitous, frankly. So, be mindful of that from one perspective. And I think there's just probably just one other thing that I wanted to add that I didn't get into the chat, but just as a sort of thing for in-house, and we were talking a little bit about, sort of how you might start off slowly, and I was talking about the internal opportunities to communicate and to make yourself visible. And there's one I really just wanted to share with everyone, because it was one that was shared with me. It was a sort of thing that was used on me, and I actually thought that's a really nice way to go about things. I had someone, I'd given a lunchtime presentation, and there was a junior person, relatively new person in the business that I was working in at the time, who just sort of said, I heard what you said at lunchtime about, attracting the kind of architects that we want to attract and how we're not necessarily reaching all of the people that we want to reach at the moment. And I've got a bit of experience with LinkedIn and I've got a few questions and I'd like a bit of advice. Could I just pull you aside for 20 minutes and have a bit of a chat? And that was a really interesting around that person. And that was a young person. This is going back a while, sort of 8 to 10 years now. And I thought that was a really nice, gentle method for a junior person to start building their personal brand with me as a more senior person in the communications team, and just sort of me to start to get a sense of what this person's about and what they're interested in and how that can then align with the business. So if you're younger or if you're new to this profession and you're looking to make connections with senior people in your business, and I don't know, this might even work out in the consultant world as well, that thing of, can you just give me a bit of advice, or can I ask you a question about this, or I've got an idea, can I grab you for a coffee? That can be a really, really powerful thing to start developing your personal brand.
On that, we might end. So hopefully that's been valuable for people, and there'll be another Build Up event very soon. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Take care, everyone.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Built Environment Marketing Show. Don't forget to check out the show notes, which will have useful links and resources connected to this episode. You can find that on abbasmarketing.com. And of course, if you like the show, please do share it with others on social, as it helps more people to find us. See you soon.